All right, YouTube, do you remember back when people who were like Democratic partisans, liberals, Fox keeps using that term. I don't know why. It's not really applicable to the Clinton people or anything like that. It's barely even able to be used for like Sanders fans, progressives. It's diverging to the point where you've got social justice warrior, the political movement, and then you've got basically corporatist and bankster party that, they could be easily like McCain Republicans, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like, you could put their names into a hat and little like D's and R's into another and just have them switch party based on which one they draw, and nobody could tell the fucking difference. But I can remember when these so-called liberals used to not only question but also mock really the media at the end of the Bush era, especially if you were using Facebook. Certainly at the time, there was almost what amounted to a resurgent hippie movement at the time. People were desperately anti-war, realized surveillance was a bad thing, the police state was a bad thing. They worried openly about martial law. They worried openly about the possibility that we were undergoing a sort of militarized takeover or something along those lines. And I highly doubt that many of these people trusted the media. Based on my interactions with such folks, almost all of which ended up supporting Obama. Some of them supported like the libertarian or green movement, but it was a minority. Most of them, they took one look at Obama, saw what he said, and said, oh, well, I'm going to vote for him because we need to stop these evil Republicans. But they didn't typically like the media at the time. In fact, a lot of them, towards a few years after that, they're sharing like RT articles and stuff like that. They say, oh, anti-war, here's this Russian media is telling us, why, this casualty total that CNN won't tell us, and Fox calls you a pinko if you're anti-war and stuff like that. And by the way, we should legalize marijuana, and nobody in the media was pushing for that. They used to question the media. The more centrist left, so-called again, would question it, say, well, I'm not sure that this is accurate, or they're still corporate media, so take it with a grain of salt. And then they'd say, if they were more towards the fringe, and they were solely worried about, like, I want to smoke weed and not go die off in a desert somewhere, essentially they took up like a hippie line of, oh, I don't trust the man, and it's stupid media and stuff like that. Now these people, I guess they got a decade older, and all of a sudden they've turned into really, really boring, like Mondale'ites or something like that. And now the media is sacrosanct to them. They say, oh, the media is beyond reproach. This fake news stuff, it's like watching people's reaction to Trump calling CNN fake news. Now, I happen to agree with him. I also call Fox and all these other organizations fake news, but he is correct in identifying what they really are. It's not journalism. It's not really part of the press at this point. It's little more than infotainment and a government mouthpiece for people who happen to be neocons and neoliberals. That's all CNN is. There's a reason they're in decline. Thank goodness. Hopefully, eventually, they stop existing altogether. It's retarded. It's useless. You shouldn't pay attention to these people. It's pointless. But it's funny to see their reaction, because the moniker fake news was drummed up in the first place by people who were Clinton fans, attempting to blame elements of the underground media, groups like Drudge, groups like Breitbart or The Blaze, number one, and number two, individuals online who they imagined were being paid by Russia to spread disinfo. I would be willing to guess that they would also conflate, because they don't know much within lamestream media. They don't know much, obviously, about social media and how it actually operates. They couldn't figure out 4chan. They probably, in many cases, don't understand Reddit. They don't get how some Facebook feeds work and so forth. They're low-tech, in essence. So they probably would take one look at my channel, or Ramsey Paul, or Malnu, or any of a dozen other people. They'd probably assume that we were like being paid by Russia for what we're posting, at least insofar as the election went. Oh, these people are spreading propaganda, they must be Russians or something like that. It's like, do I really want to eat that Russian MRE on video, because then am I going to have some retard CNN reporter say, putting my name in a fake news article or something? No, I don't actually worry about that, but it's funny to think about. It's a funny rhetorical situation, I suppose. But these individuals used that term, fake news, first to denote competitors of the mainstream U.S. media and its overseas partners. Essentially, anybody who supported Trump was fake news, according to them. Trump is simply taking the same loaded term that they themselves invented and throwing it at CNN. And the same people who had no problem with that term being used to denote media groups or individuals engaged in the activities of the press that did not like Clinton, for whatever reason, are suddenly up in arms. There's their hypocrisy. But I can remember when it wasn't that way. I can remember when the shoe was almost on the other foot, when people, during the Iraq War especially, during the height of the Iraq War, it's still going on, but I mean when we had several 100,000 troops on the ground in Iraq, that is. I can remember that a lot of these people, who were a decade younger at the time, didn't like any aspects of any part of the media. If they listened to anything, oddly enough, RT was the one that they most often posted there, because, like I've pointed out before, RT is probably not the most reliable source of actual news when it comes to what Russia is up to. But when it comes to observing what the U.S. government is doing wrong with regards especially to foreign policy, it has a vested interest in keeping them to account. So if I want to learn what Putin is doing wrong, I'm not going to pay attention to RT because they're not going to report on it. They're going to be talking about his 85% approval rate and how the currency just got valued a little bit higher and how Russia is going to do all these great, wonderful, enormous things. Likewise, if I want to hear the truth about something that Trump is doing wrong, I'm probably not going to pay attention to Drudge about that, because chances are I'm not going to see it, or if I see it at all there, it's going to be spun into oblivion. CNN would not be a reliable outlet for news on almost anything at this point. They're pure Clintonian. The Clintonians, of course, aren't even in power within the scope of national politics at large. Yeah, there are a lot of neoliberals in the Democratic Party and still a lot of neocons they could sort of tolerate within the GOP. But they're the ones suffering right now. CNN is not going to give you accurate information on what Trump's up to. Anything he does will be spun heavily. They're not going to give you an accurate reading of what Chelsea Clinton is up to. They're going to fawn over and dote upon her and pretend that she's special and stuff like that, regardless of how many mistakes she makes, how many scandals she's embroiled with. It's like this new line of, oh, in the last 2 weeks, Trump has had more scandals than Obama had in 8 years. Bullcrap. It depends, I suppose, on whether you consider mass surveillance unconstitutional, limitless drone-based warfare and tens of thousands of civilian casualties, Benghazi, poorly guarded government servers, the botched ACA rollout, and a million other things to be scandals or not. Now, if you give him a pass on these things because you don't care, because one of Obama's partners is signing part of your paycheck, yeah, you probably don't consider those scandals. And this is the CNN style of news reporting. It is fake news. It is completely fake. Most of what you see on these so-called news networks, is it even really news? No, it's just analysis. Some other reporting firm has reported on a story, some local site, some foreign site, whatever it happens to be. CNN and Fox and all of these other organizations simply analyze that material. That's why I've said for quite some time now, any randomly chosen individual who is half coherent can do that job without getting a 6- or 7-figure salary, because that's all they do. They're not on the ground looking for breaking news. They're simply analyzing it. What we, as the underground segment of the media, are capable of doing is analyzing this material without the corporate and bankster bias inherent in all major news networks. They are all corporations. Well, I'm not a corporation. Ramsey Paul's not a corporation. There are 100 other random YouTubers and Facebook pages. We're not corporate apparatuses. Some of us make more money than others. Some of us get more views than others. Regardless, though, it's not a corporate thing. So if you think that it makes you a leftist by listening to CNN and crying because Trump called them fake news, when CNN is a multi-million-dollar network with corporate subsidiaries and backers, and its hands in the banks and rubbing elbows with everyone in D.C., it's not some revolutionary hippie-trippy granola-crunching move. That just makes you a fool, honestly. I can remember when it wasn't that way. I can remember when the left was the one largely questioning the government's line. When Bush was in power and waging his wars and doing all of his stupid shit, it was assumed by people who at the time were more actual leftists than they are now, and were almost like left anarchists or something. It was assumed that all branches of corporate media were guilty of colluding with the government, that they were dishonest, they were selling us lies for profit so that we could keep fighting people overseas, and probably in the minds of some of them as a prelude to martial law, government takeover. They considered that not only to be possible, but perhaps likely. Now, though, they turn around and say none of these things can ever happen. It's like the concept of a rigged election. All anybody in CNN or MSNBC has been talking about lately is how the Russians rigged the election or something along those lines. That despite the fact that Obama and every news network during the actual election, when they thought that Clinton was a shoo-in, said it couldn't actually occur, that it was impossible for any foreign power to substantially influence our election in any meaningful way. Therein, again, lies the hypocrisy. So these people are not actual leftists. They're simply partisans that happen to be butthurt that the corporate individual that they didn't happen to like more actually won the election when everybody in the media was telling them that he wouldn't. Now, why do you even trust these people? They spent months telling you Trump couldn't win. They spent months telling you, don't worry about it. Clinton's, she's got it in the bag. She's going to be so far ahead of Trump. And she lost. Well, there's your problem. And all these crocodile tears over the Electoral College don't change the end result. Not going to do anything for you. You can sit there and whine all day. It's not accomplishing anything. So, yeah, a little bit of hypocrisy from these people who claim that they wear their Che t-shirts from Walmart. They go to Walmart, they get the Che t-shirt. Then they go and they go to Starbucks and they order their $10 drink. And they sit there on their iPad and rant about how bad capitalism is and how evil and despicable conservatives are, or something along those lines. It's great fun watching people like this. I coined the term Starbucks Marxist to describe them some time ago, because it's not clear they're actual socialists or communists or Greens or any other actual leftist ideology. They're simply spoiled whiners. They're trust fund babies, usually. From the upper class suburbs. They've never actually had to deal with any significant real world situation most of the time. If they did, they'd piss their pants. They don't have any experience in taking initiative for anything, really. Other than, hey, I started a Tumblr. Well, that's good. Okay, you started a Tumblr. Now do something meaningful with it that doesn't involve, again, rambling about how bad capitalism is when you're using your China-made smartphone or something along those lines. That's hypocrisy, too. That's about all. Peace out.